honored to be speaking with you and you in your room that I keep seeing on Instagram.
That's right. It's my studio.
That's where all the magic happens.
Yeah, we try. We try.
I mean, I've seen a lot of you've been recording there. I've seen your post for the Metropolis. Stay
Yeah,
home.
yeah, Metropolis, yeah.
How's that going?
Well, it's gone. I finished that up. It was kind of a an experiment in live streaming during the pandemic. The regular radio show that I have, the station had to close its studio for a time. And so I just quickly pivoted to live streaming just to see, just to try it. And it turned out to be a really fun exercise. I mean, what I didn't expect was the whole digital audience that kind of forms organically. I mean, I just figured like, hey, I want to reach my audience. I'm just going to do this. But then when I discovered that people from around the world were coming online and listening and saying hello, it kind of blew my mind.
Did it make you feel more connected to your fans?
Definitely, definitely. It also, I think, something they appreciated was that it gave them a glimpse into my personal world. Also, my wife was pregnant for much of the pandemic, and we just had twin boys 2 months ago. So, for the entirety of that kind of magical part of our lives, we've been in lockdown. So it was a way to connect with people, and they just loved the fact that I would just bring these real life aspects to them during the show.
I was going to congratulate you about your boys at the
Thank
end,
you.
but now that you mentioned it, I have to congratulate you. They're adorable.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really happy. We just brought them to the doctor today for a checkup, and they're healthy and growing.
Well, perfect timing to make sure that you're home and, get to cherish these times.
It's true. Yeah, I feel very fortunate, especially in light of the hardship that many people have felt during this time. It's been really special to just experience the pregnancy and their birth at this really unusual point in human history.
Indeed. And this is my way of starting to get into discussing the backstory. So I got a little backstory about Jason right now during quarantine and family and dad. Did I do okay?
Yeah, yeah, it's fun.
I mean, tell me about your podcast. Was this something you had thought of before leaving officially last year after, a decade having a show, or was it
Yeah,
this year?
yeah. The conversation around the backstories actually goes back a few years now. I've been involved in Soho House from the founding of the West Hollywood Soho House over 10 years ago now. And, being part of that community and doing events with them. In the last couple of years, we started informally talking about a podcast. Obviously, there's so much activity in that space and it's so hyped. And, I was very receptive to the idea. It just took a while. And in a funny way, I think the pandemic kind of ushered things along so that production began, because I think they were looking for ways to maintain that sense of connection and community with their membership. And so to do a podcast made a lot of sense. Originally, it was intended to be, a meeting in real life at a Soho House venue. And the idea of the podcast being to kind of capture all of the layers of that experience, all the audio, the buzz in the room, the spontaneity of that experience where someone could even come up to the table and say hello and, unexpectedly. We really wanted to reflect, actually being there. Of course, the pandemic upended that whole idea. And so we've just forged ahead online and made the best of it like everyone.
But why the title, The Backstory?
I've never been a huge fan of that title. It seems a little obvious to me, but it's just about the concept for the podcast being, delving into people's origins, their creative evolution, their professional trajectory. What is their backstory leading up to this moment in time?
Mm-hmm. And then what kind of topics are you covering? How deep are you getting into?
That's actually what's really been exciting and interesting is that it's wide open. A lot has to do with the curation of these guests, the people that we're putting together. We don't want them to be too similar from the same kind of area or professional discipline, but we want to find and discover the commonality in their experience. And so that's where some of the magic lies, especially in distinguishing this podcast from the field. And obviously, there's a lot of interview podcasts. So one unique aspect is what's the magic between these two people, and a lot of times the pairings are totally unexpected, and we want that. So I think it just opens it up wide. There's really no parameters or guardrails as far as what we talk about. I think my job as an interviewer, as a moderator, is to try and shape the conversation so that it does make some sense in terms of the where it's going. But we really want it to reflect a real meeting, a lunch meeting for drinks at Soho House. And so that type of conversation can be really wide ranging.
And what kind of guest are we going to get to hear on your podcast, if you can share?
Well, the first episode is actor Kristen Bell. Do you know Kristen Bell? And an author and academic named Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. And one of the funny things is I'm kind of using this as a learning experience and a growth experience for me too, as much as I hope it is for the audience. And when I heard organizational psychologist, I was like, oh, so this guy's like Marie Kondo, wow, a container store, but in actuality, it's about organizations and companies and the dynamic of success in businesses, as opposed to organizing your house. So that's the first episode, but we're pairing like directors and actors and authors, and I hope to really go even wider to include athletes and architects and all kinds of people. The magic is really in the curation, and I think that idea of curation is also a reflection of the Soho House experience, because Soho House I don't believe it's exclusive for the sake of exclusivity. I think it's exclusive because it's the presentation of a curated environment. It's the finer things in life. It's a refined atmosphere. And so I think the process of refining our ideas for these meetings, it's just like a great guest list at a party, when you kind of put that dinner party together and you seat people together and you're thinking about it, you're going, oh, we should have him sitting next to her because I think that they would really get on well. So it's sort of trying to create some insight about where the conversation could go.
Are you going to be covering any politics?
Yeah, I think especially these days, you can't get away from it. I think it has to be things that are universal enough for them to have some shelf life, because I don't want to talk about things that happened this week, and then if the podcast, you don't listen to the podcast until next month, it just feels like it's outdated. So we have one coming up between a playwright and a screenwriter named Kemp Powers and a composer and jazz musician named Terrence Blanchard. And they are both accomplished African-American creators and artists. And I have to talk to them about America in 2020. It would be irresponsible not to, and talk about how their creativity, when cast against the realities of social and political life in America, what does that mean? Why are these ideas important today? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it will get a little bit political at times.
Indeed. I mean, that's what's going on nowadays. So hard to get away from it. Are you going to have, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I read it wrong, you're also going to have Kevin Costner?
We hope to. I don't know that that's been confirmed. but we certainly have an in because our podcast producers, 101 Studios,
Mhm.
have good connections with Kevin. They're doing the Yellowstone show
Oh,
with
nice.
him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, and if so, I mean, you got a cover about him and meeting Richard Burton, which that's where it started with his career, from what I've heard. But I've yet
Okay.
to see
Okay.
him
Hold on.
talk about it, which, you know, that
I'll
would
take note. I'll take note of that. I'll take note of that.
be.
No, that's the challenge here because someone like him who has such a sweeping career and he's so iconic. I mean, where do you start and how much time do you have? You know what I mean? It's like, do you just talk about his current projects? I know I saw a movie that's just coming out.
Let him
Um,
go.
where do you draw the line? So that's certainly a challenge with someone of his stature.
So what do you do in situations like that where it's like it's an artist that has such a broad career? Like, where do you start? How do you break it down? Or do you go based on who the person is partnered with?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the partnership because I don't want it to be kind of this one-way conversation with two separate people. We got to find the areas where their experience is shared. I mean, ultimately for me, I just want a good conversation that feels fresh and insightful. It doesn't have to be the defining interview of Kevin Costner. You know what I mean?
Right.
um, that just puts too much pressure on everyone involved. Um, if I can do my homework and preparation so that if I feel like it's going in a particular direction, and I can reinforce that in a knowledgeable way. So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I guess I would just say um, it's it's important not to put too much pressure on the interview to try and do too much. Sometimes a little goes a long way, especially with a guy like Kevin Costner, where you know there may be things about his career that he can't even relate to anymore. Because they're just so far back in time. I know I feel that way sometimes myself when people ask me about things that are, ask me about working on The Matrix. It's like, well, yeah, but that was like over 20 years ago. So it's not something I think about that much.
Right. Right. Now that speaking of working with the Matrix, I mean, yes, you worked with those, and then also I have that you're involved in the music for Top Gun Maverick.
Yes, I'm done with that now, and that project has sort of been put on hold because of, we keep going back to the pandemic, but I believe it's rescheduled for next summer. And it would not shock me if they reinvent all of the work that we did on the music front. As a music supervisor, I've done a bunch of different movies, including The Matrix you mentioned, Tron Legacy, and actually the same director as Tron Legacy, a guy named Joe Kosinski, brought me on for Top Gun Maverick. So I worked on that for about a year and a half, and we did some great things. But one thing I will say is that music is something people feel like, it's so subjective. People feel like they can change it, and people feel like, their idea is going to be the best. So it's difficult to be a music supervisor to a committee. If you're working with one mind and one vision, that's great. But I do think on Top Gun Maverick, you had Tom Cruise. He's very outspoken. He's a producer. He's the star of the movie. He has a lot of influence. If he decided he wanted to change up the music in the 11th hour, sometime next month, he can do that because he's Tom Cruise. So yes, I worked on it for a good stretch. It was great, but I'm done with that now, and I'm not sure where it'll end up.
Well, we definitely look forward to it. And hopefully, your material is in there. I mean, we remember the Maverick from back then, and the soundtrack was great. So
Yeah,
that's
I know.
what
It
I'm
was high
looking
stakes
forward to.
working on that because the soundtrack for the original was so huge in popular culture. And that's another thing is when there's so much kind of expectation on something, it's people are always like, the studio wants to have their influence. The director is like, hey, wait a second. The producer, Jerry Bruckheimer, is very outspoken, has strong opinions. There's another voice. So it's a tough scene when you got that many cooks in the kitchen.
Mhm. And you've also been involved in video game music, right?
Yeah,
How
I've done a
different
handful
is
over the
that?
years. Yeah, yeah. I worked on some of the music for the Matrix video games and also a few others. One called Destroy All Humans back in the day. Yeah, I mean, the music supervision game is really based on, project by project. It has a lot to do with the personalities and the chemistry on something. It's not a job that I'm actively looking to do. I'm not there out shopping my wares for music supervision. I really wait for the right project, the right script, the right opportunity where I feel like I can be talented.
Mhm. Where will we be able to check them out?
Really, wherever you get your podcasts, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, they'll be widely available.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing, and
Cool.
congratulations with your podcast. This year's been huge. I mean, and your twins, which are so adorable, adorable boys. Congratulations.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. You
All
take
right, take
care.
care. Bye.
Thank you.